outline was shared with the board informally almost 2 months ago. I'd received feedback from a number of you individually, but the thought was to put this on as a discussion item for group discussion and hopefully endorsement, at least of selected items, selected recommendations on ways that the town can go about improving its communications. Going back with the introduction, it's one of the board's goals for the current year was to improve communications with all constituencies. When the staff prepared its annual work program last December, we'd come up with 6 or 8 different suggestions, recommendations on things that we thought would be go towards accomplishing that particular goal. Many of those are listed under the recent accomplishments. But in our never-ending effort in order to try to improve communications, the board had asked for specific suggestions, and we've come up with another list of about a dozen of them. So without reading through each of them, really looking for feedback here. And going in order, the first is about the improvements to the town's website. We listed a number of things that we think could be added to the website that we think would make it more advantageous to any prospective users and hopefully increase its utilization by users. One other thing that didn't make it onto this list, though we have discussed it, was the concept of creating a task force of people who are probably more technologically literate than any of us on staff that might be able to contribute to this effort. I've had a couple of volunteers, both board members and residents, who are interested in serving in such a capacity. But if the board thinks this is a worthy task to undertake, I would suggest that we go ahead, create the task force, empower them to come up with suggestions on how we could go about improving both the content and the format of the website, and then bring those back for implementation.
Okay.
Thumbs up.
Sounds good.
Okay.
The Citizen Issues Guide, we've wrestled with this as long as I've been with the town, trying to anticipate what the hot button issues are going to be. A year and a half ago, it was garbage. Within the last year, it's been roundabout, it's been land swap, but the suggestion here is to, at some point, whether it's during the board's annual goal setting, during the budget review process, to say, this, and this are items deserving of particular scrutiny, particular educational efforts, trying to identify them in advance and saying, let's get the word out. Obviously, we can't do it for everything. Obviously, we can't always anticipate what the hot-button issues are going to be, but the effort here is to say, if we can do a better job in trying to identify what the board thinks they are, staff can devote the time and energy to make sure the detailed position papers, the pros and cons, all the things that all the questions that frequently get asked, but candidly, sometimes we just get blindsided because we didn't realize the level of debate or controversy it was going to raise. There's nothing magical about 5, but again, I wanted to try to do it systematically, and if we could all get on board to say this is one of those items that we think is going to rise to the level of significant public discussion. The e-newsletter, we talked about it recently at a workshop session. I reintroduced it here for a couple of reasons. Besides the fact of making clearly the Sentinel, the town's monthly newsletter, is by far the most well-read and the most aggressive outreach tool that we have. It beats Channel 8, it beats the website, it beats the CAC, it beats morning coffees. Everybody gets it. Who chooses to read it? But it's chock filled with information, and every one of our surveys tells us it's well-read. My premise here is we can do an even better job. One of the biggest deficiencies with it right now is it's dated. It has to go to the printer almost 2 weeks before it gets received. So as a result, some of the we're pressing deadlines to get things in there, and there are things that are happening more recently that with the once-a-month schedule, if we were at the electronic format, you produce it one day and it's distributed the next. Obviously, that's the efficiency part. There's a huge cost savings. I think I've shared with you on a couple of occasions that our effort to solicit a database for the distribution of an electronic email for the newsletter, we're up to about 1,400 addresses. We've gone through and made sure that we don't have duplications. We're counting a household once, even if we have husbands and wives or children's emails. But we've got about 1,400 out of our 3,500 households within the community. So at some point, we're going to be looking for board endorsement of the concept and flipping the switch, if you will, from the traditional printed copy to the electronic, and we think there are a lot of advantages to going electronic. It ties in with the next one, which is the email blast.
Can I ask something about the
By all means.
e-newsletter? How often would you suggest that?
I'd
Per
still do
month?
it monthly,
Only once a month?
but the fact that when it goes out, it has the most recent information.
Right, that's the plus. I
That's the real plus. And just as an example, we've been trying one of the standard items that are included in the current hard copy, print copy of the newsletter is recent town board action. You have one that's going to be received in your mailboxes next Friday, but it won't include information about tonight because it got sent to the printer 11 days ago.
Right.
That's just the example of the kinds of stuff that can go in there.
In the mayor's newsletter, I try to figure out what's going to happen 2 weeks from now. I try to make sure that it's relevant, so it's sometimes difficult.
It is. It doesn't answer them all, but it does tie in with the next one, which is the e-blast, when there is something significant. There's been a water main break and there's a water shutoff, to remind people that no parking on these streets today because the paving equipment is coming in. And even as we've recently seen, Boulder County has notified us that the mosquito sprayers are coming in tomorrow at 8 p.m. We don't
Thanks
have-
for taking care of that, by the way.
we don't have a great way to communicate all of that kind of information, but the e-blast is a possibility to do it, especially when it's targeted. To those that reside south of Colton, for those that reside north of Rock Creek, in Rock Creek. For those in Sagamore, here's something that's going to happen on 76th Day. An opportunity to do a community-wide or a targeted distribution of
I
some
really like that
information.
a lot.
Is there a
I think-
way, do you have an action plan about how we would get the other 2,000 residents that we don't have email?
We talked about it briefly during the newsletter, and once we put the word out that this is the last, I think we'll have greater subscription. We've had them trickling in as a result of encouraging, give us your email address because these are things that we want to move towards. But I think once we sever the hard copy, I think we'll have a greater influx. It was my hope to get to at least 50% of the households. I was looking for a number of about 2,000. We're getting close. Again, we're about 1,400. But at some point, I think we're going to need to flip that switch. At least I'm recommending that we do. And another offshoot of that is, I'm not saying that $40-some thousand that we're going to save by no longer having a printed copy of the monthly newsletter. I think that's a way to finance some of the things that we're talking about here and some of the things that we've already done. Blog sites, we've already done it. I know some of the board members have already been doing it. Eric's got one, and we've got a link from his site to the town site. Deborah's put some postings up. Some staff members have put some up. I'm the dinosaur in the group, probably. I put my first one up last week.
No, you're not.
Huh?
No, you're not yet. Joe and I are still reluctant to engage in that.
I got 3 years.
It's interesting to see the number of postings and the number of comments. There aren't a lot of people, but I think it's something that in time it will develop a constituency. So it's something that we've talked about doing. I put it here on the recommendations, but candidly, we've already started it. The Citizens Academy is another outreach effort. It's almost kind of like the candidates orientation that we did for the first time before the last municipal election. But the idea of having citizens who are interested in knowing about the nuts and bolts participate in a one-night-a-week class for 6 weeks and identify and come in and speak with the finance director to find out about municipal finance and the public works director to find out about public works operations and the parks and rec director, the idea, and then to have a graduation ceremony at the end. I think for those that have an interest in their municipal operation, it's an opportunity to serve that interest without boring the 99% that don't have a concern or a care about it. And the thought was we could do that a couple times a year.
I think that's a great idea. It will eliminate a lot of misperceptions of what takes place behind the scene.
We can try. I would suggest that it be limited to a select number. I've suggested 15. This is a real common occurrence within the police service, and you'll see it all over the country where they'll have citizen police academies, and they'll do patrols, and they'll do gun shoots, and they'll do all sorts of things. But this is a broader base, and to say, if you want to know more about your town, here we're going to devote the time and give you that crash course in it. And again, I would compare it to the evening that we spent with the candidates a year and a half ago, and just said, we're here to answer all your questions. We've got a bit of background information and preparation for you, but hit us with your best shot. We'll try to give you the best answers that we can. And the thought of doing that once or twice a year, if there's community interest, I think it would go a long way towards serving those that seem to have a thirst for more. Student Government Day, it's a different constituency, but it's the same concept. This is really more mentoring. I mean, I'm not expecting that 17 and 18-year-old juniors and seniors at Monarch are all of a sudden going to become interested, community spokespeople at the microphone. But if we can instill an interest and an appreciation for what their government is and does, I have done this in some of my other communities, but it's a great way to facilitate that. I never realized that the mayor is in a full-time position, that board members, have other jobs and other lives, and what it's like to be the town attorney or the Parks and Rec director and the diversity of things that they get exposed to. It takes a lot of time to pull it off, to prepare it, to pick the students, to coordinate it with the schools. But at the end, I've always found it to be a very worthwhile effort for those that have participated in it. So if you think it has merit, I'd approach the school district to see if they have an interest in undertaking it. But the staff does.
And
Good.
you might look at it in terms of maybe not government, but also career day, because kids are looking for different careers.
Mm-hmm.
And this may be one of the places they visit or sign up for in one of their activities through the schools. They do that.
And I know that we've had students in here, and Dr. Cog gets students that come down for U.S. government class and things like that, and there's always ones that want to do reports, so this might be something that, gives them a...
Or scouting, too. Boy Scouts or the Eagle Scout, they're required to attend meetings.
Oh, yeah, they have to go to.
It's anecdotal, but one of the communities I served in the Chicagoland area, in the suburbs, the Students' Initiative, and as I said, it ends with a mock city council meeting, so the mayor and the council members, and their agenda item that they wanted to initiate that night was to ban smoking in public places. And it was an interesting discussion, something that hadn't, and it's become law in the state of Illinois, but this would have been 10, 12 years ago, and it actually got the city council in subsequent meetings to start talking about whether we should regulate smoking in restaurants and in other public places. And so it was interesting to see that outgrowth from something that started from a class of junior and senior high school students. I've probably heard more positive feedback from those board members that have responded to the draft that they saw this report back in June. Periodic review and disclosure of executive session minutes. I originally said semi-annually, but then I was corrected by both the clerk and the town attorney to say that we only keep our executive session minutes for 90 days. So my suggestion here was periodic and quarterly, but at least on a quarterly basis, if we can go back and say, that negotiation is done, that litigation is done, that whatever the issue that might have been discussed in executive session is done and over, we can release the discussion. And I would use the example of, we had a number of discussions over the course of probably the last 6 or 9 months, maybe even longer, on the possible acquisition of some open space adjacent to the Oxner property. Well, we've entered into a public option agreement. It is now public. What we plan on doing, acquiring 13 acres, $85,000 per acre. You took the action on that. It would be fine to release the minutes at which all of that might have been discussed. And I use that as an example within recent memory. But for the concern that you just hide behind these closed sessions every couple of months, here's an opportunity to say we're trying to peel away the veil of confidentiality when it's no longer necessary. A burden does fall on both the clerk and the attorney to be reviewing those and making recommendations on what can and what cannot be or should not be released. But it's an effort to try to say, when we can, we'll go back and release it.
No, it enhances transparency. I think that's actually needed, and it's been requested by several citizens. So I think
It's an effort. And recognize that if after 90 days, then they no longer exist, and they at the end of that 90 days, it wasn't concluded, it may never
No, I
be
understand
released.
that.
But it's
Yeah,
at least
but-
to say, we're going to spend every executive session and look at the last 3 months, and anything that we have discussed that can be released, we'll release it, and it'll be part of your agenda packet. Executive session minutes of so-and-so, and here are the things that have been released. I don't know how much of it's going to come out, but at least it's an effort to say we're going to devote a process to it, and periodically we're going to be able to release things that we've talked about in closed session once the confidentiality is no longer necessary. Again, from those that I've heard from, they like that one probably the best. And then the last one, and we've talked a lot about it, and I don't have suggestions yet on what the exact protocols would be, but for having a protocol for responding to citizen inquiries at the microphone. Do we respond on the dime? Do we respond, at the following meeting? Do we respond on television? Do we respond directly to the individual? Does it come from a particular person? All of those things. But I think we do need, and the board has had discussion about it, wants to have an ability to close the loop. May not always be satisfied with the answer, but the presumption that at least an answer has been conveyed to the person that was asking the question. Not even a hesitancy, my only caution is I would still encourage the board not to encourage that this be the source for a concern or a complaint. And I'll use the example. My stoplight or my street light or street sign is missing. Shouldn't have to wait until an off Monday night for that to be brought to the town's attention. Whereas if it had been brought to the Public Works Director's attention, or Sergeant Cullen's attention, or my attention, it hopefully could have even been responded to immediately. So this isn't the only place that you go for your relief, your satisfaction, your question, or your concern. But when it does come here, you know how the answer, that chain is going to be brought to a close. So I think we need to work on what those exact protocols are, but I think that would go a long way towards that sense that, well, I raise an issue and I never get a response. And then the last couple, the personal blog, monthly meeting with the manager, whether that, I know some of the trustees have been doing their periodic coffees. The mayor and I have talked about doing either a TV show or a periodic meeting, but to say one day a week, whether it's an evening, whether it's a Saturday, boom, open mic, whatever the issue, whatever the question, whatever the concern might be, it's another opportunity. You don't have to devote a Monday night to it. You don't have to be intimidated by coming in front of a crowd. Here's an opportunity to meet one-on-one with whatever the issue or concern might be. And then the last one that I had there was the quarterly meetings with each of our advisory boards and commissions. I try to attend meetings as frequently as I can, as my personal schedule might allow and what their agendas are calling for. But I think even going further to say, at least 4 times a year, I'm going to meet with every one of the 5 advisory boards and commissions, if they have any questions and concerns. I mean, we set up a policy and a program for presentations. You've got one later this evening. But the idea that there can be better dialogue and communication between senior staff and the advisory groups. And I go back to the meetings that we had in January when we first started talking about the annual work programs. The meeting I had with the 5 committee chairs was incredibly refreshing and I thought productive. And the idea to be able to continue that some way. So this was one of my other suggestions. And it's not a be-all, end-all. These are just some of the staff's suggestions. We're open to any and all, going back to what the goal was, improve communications with all of our constituencies. So any and all feedback we're looking forward to.
Thoughts from the board?
They're all good suggestions. I like them. Very well thought out.
I agree.
No, I think it's outstanding. Obviously, we've met about this previously, and I shared my enthusiastic support of all these things. I think it's a great work product or something to work off of. So I think the manager should be congratulated for that.
Yeah, it seems to me that any and all of these would be other avenues for discussing and keeping that dialogue open with our residents. You know, the one concern I have is, depending on how many of these we implement, how much staff time is this going to take? That's, I guess, the one. If we get too many days in here with kids and everybody else, you guys will be doing mock government all the time and not so much government. So I guess that would be the only concern, is how many we implement. But I think these are all, as much as we can, ways to open up.
That's a great comment, and the staff has had some concern about with the staff blog and some of the other things. We'll know when we hit saturation.
Yeah.
And I think another one, and we go back to one of the initiatives that we've already done, which was the universally available agendas. The board made the decision maybe a year ago. And anybody that wanted a town agenda could get a packet. Just contact Phyllis and you'll get an agenda packet. Made available for you on Thursday to be picked up on Friday. We won't deliver it, but anybody can get one. And we'll look at it after a few months to see what the penetration was. And I think we have 4 people that have subscribed to that service. I think we'd go back and look at some of these, and I use the idea of the blog. Eric's had a lot of comment, a lot of feedback, much more so on his blog than any of the others. I don't think any of the blog statements, whether town board staff or myself, have received any comment back yet. But it hasn't been on very long, so give it some time and see. But if we came back to a point and said, we've posted over 100 communications, and here's been our feedback. We might decide at that point, it was a nice try, but it's not producing the fruit, and let's move on to something else. That's what I would suggest that we do to make sure that we're not spinning our wheels on some things that just aren't delivering what we wanted to.
And the other comment I had as far as the advisory committee, I think that's excellent to meet with them. I think it was really helpful when you've done that before. I think, was it last year with the budget, or was it this coming up? But I'm not even sure four times a year are necessary, because we have quite a few, again, that's quite a few meetings. But I think certain times of the year, again, I think as a committee member, that budget time, and then also maybe goal-setting sessions, maybe those 2 times a year are particularly important. There's just a lot of questions that we're trying to bounce off each other and don't have answers to. So that's my personal thought on that one.
Okay.
Other thoughts?
No, I've already provided my comments as well, and so I think this is really good stuff.
Yeah.
And we did talk, before you got in, Eric, about the task force on the website, and assuming that, and I got a lot of head nods, that there was interest in going ahead and doing that. I said I've had expressions of interest from at least 3 people, 2 board members and at least 1 resident, and hopefully we'll get some more, but I'd like to get that put together. I'm going to ask staff tomorrow who on the staff wants to serve as the staff liaison to that group, but to get half dozen people who are very technologically proficient to say, here's what you can and should be doing. So.
Yeah, sounds good.
And I think the key to having these be successful is getting the word out, advertising all these different things that people can take advantage of. How you do that.
I'm
Get the word out
snickering
that we're
because
getting the word out.
as the mayor
Getting the word
described,
out about the word.
as the mayor described him trying to be omnipotent and predicting what he could put in his newsletter article for this coming Friday, I put this work program in his mind to say, here are the things that the board is discussing about enhanced communication. And while waffled a bit to say these are items for future discussion, the fact that these were the things that we were talking about are trying to enhance our outreach efforts. I didn't go into the accomplishments because I thought that would be more grandstanding and patting ourselves on the back, but I would also congratulate you that the things that we've done, the suggestion recently to start televising workshop sessions. We started televising the last one, and we're televising this one, and then they're being rebroadcast. The idea of making the additions to the written agenda material that gets published on Channel 8, not only the legal description, an ordinance approving an agreement with Boulder County, but then explaining a bit about what it is, 1 or 2 sentences. Great suggestions that have come up, some from the table, some from the floor, but as we implement them, I think we need to at least recognize, hey, we tried to do a pretty decent job, and there have been a number of things that we have done in effort to improve communication and transparency. So,
We should close the loop also on this, partially close the loop periodically, like, how are we doing every quarter or twice a year, in terms of the things that you've recommended. So if you could just put it on your tickler list of things to do.
we'll do. An example, we'll advertise the First Citizens Academy, and if we don't get enough people that are interested in participating, we know, maybe we'll try to get in another year, but
Yeah.
we won't do it if it doesn't generate a degree of interest.
Great, thanks. Home rule?
Your second one, at your meeting, I believe it was June 22nd, you had a presentation on June 8th, you had a follow-up discussion on June 22nd, and the board had asked staff to come up with a recommended educational program for future discussion on the issue of home rule, and also to begin preparing a proposed timeline for when certain activities might take place. I've laid out the 2-part here. First of all is the educational campaign, and there's 6 or 8 different elements of it, many of them time-sensitive. The suggestion that, as an example, 4 specific newsletter issues in September, October, November, and December be devoted to a specific subset, that a town hall debate be held during the month of late November, early December, a number of specific meetings be held, and outreach efforts, the fact of going out into the neighborhoods. The last time we did that in terms of having meetings in the local schools was when we were talking about the town center vision, and we had specific meetings at the elementary schools. And while the turnout wasn't extraordinary, it was a different clientele. So we did reach a constituency that, for whatever reason, we didn't meet on a Monday night here or a Tuesday night in front of Planning Commission by holding it at Superior Elementary or somewhere else. So that's where we came up with these ideas or suggestions. And again, it's not a be-all, end-all. It was just a discussion of things that we thought we were certainly in a position to do and a reasonable period of time. Those that do have dates, it is tied to the proposed calendar. Nothing in stone, but the premise being that if we went with this calendar, the premise was 2010, much like 2008 when the board last had an intensive discussion on the issue of home rule, you have 2 regularly scheduled elections in 2010. You have the municipal election that's scheduled in April. You have the national elections that are national and state elections in county that are scheduled in November of 2010, which would give you the opportunity to fit your required thresholds and obligations within 2 regularly scheduled elections. One of the concerns the board had always said was we didn't want to put this kind of an important policy issue before the community in a special election, a single-purpose election, when voter turnout was probably going to be less. So with that mindset, we were gearing towards an April 2010 on the issue of, does the community want to pursue the creation of a charter, and if so, elect a charter commission in April? And assuming the answer was yes, then they've got 4 months after the election in which to do their work, present a recommendation back to the board in September that could ultimately go before the voters for ratification in November 2010. Again, for your discussion, comment.
So, should I make any comments? Let's see. The mayor's comments are anything we can do to move forward with home rule, I think would be helpful, and I think this is an excellent opportunity. Probably outreach to the homeowners association, all of the homeowners associations in town would make sense as well, to get feedback from them. I think that would be another opportunity. But anything that we could do to move, everything else is gravy, but everything we could do to move regularly scheduled elections to November would make sense in my mind, so. Eric?
Yeah, I just had one thing. Did you guys talk about doing a survey?
We talked about it, but didn't recommend it, in that that's really what the first election was for.
Well, a survey before we get to the first election.
Understand? Trying to gauge, is it going to pass or not?
So you don't think it's worth it?
I don't think it's worth it. Our efforts at doing community surveys, the last one was the Parks amenity plan, cost us a pretty substantial sum. I mean, the election is going to cost it, well, it's already a municipal election. There'll be some added costs of having multiple ballot questions on that, but it wouldn't be the $3,000 that it would cost us to conduct an election. I just didn't know that what it would produce. I would hope that your public meetings devoted to it, your community debates, all of those other things leading up to it, and even the ability to create to gather volunteers to serve on a study group would tell you whether this has legs or it doesn't.
I'd be wary of a survey that didn't have an education effort before it,
Yes. Right. Exactly.
and that would take a chunk of time too.
Well,
We have to devote to.
I didn't think so.
Really good point.
I mean, looking at
December 1st is our first deadline.
right, which is what? Where do you see December 1st? Right, we'd have to render a recommendation from the advisory committee by December 1st. And I'm assuming all these other things, the Superior Sentinel, the public meetings, the Speakers Bureau, that would all be when? Would that happen this year or after the board decides to go to ballot?
Oh, no, that's between now and
Right.
January.
Exactly.
Your
Okay, I wanted to
critical
make sure I
date-
read that right.
Your critical date is January 11,
Yeah.
at which time you have to decide, is this an issue we want to put on the ballot in April?
Right. So I don't think it would be too much of a stretch to try and do a survey in, the first half of December if we wanted to coincide that, so we had all the information for us to make a decision. I think we do want to be mindful of the cost, because I think when we did the Parks and Rec survey, we decided to send it to everyone, and it was about $13,000. Am I correct on that? It was over 10, I'm pretty sure.
It was
When we decided to send it
pricey.
to everyone.
Yeah.
So that would be a potential issue. I wonder if there's ways we could consider, electronic surveys.
Survey
with,
money.
right, but you want to make sure that you can authenticate people who are responding. So maybe you send them a little postcard with a code they can key in, but you don't have all the manual data entry and all that cost. But I think the one thing I'd like to see in here is some opportunity to gather some statistical feedback on where we are in terms of support in advance of that January 11 meeting.
Did you say early summer, though?
No,
Oh, I'm
no, I
sorry.
said early December.
Early December. I was going to say, we're already past that point.
I mean, the timing will be difficult just because of the holidays, but
And depending on how we wanted to do it, I mean, we could do with the targeted phones,
yeah, we could just do some phone surveys instead, yeah. I mean, I want to make sure, people who respond to the survey are most likely to turn out and vote too. So I see we have some time to talk about it, but it might be nice to, on our schedule, kind of pen in something about, considering a survey, finalizing, and doing it or something like that. Just,
I'm thinking out loud here. One of the things that we have on the staff's work program is the biannual community survey. It's a 4-page supplement to the newsletter. It's tentatively scheduled for November, which means it hits the doorstep on October 30th or so. I think last time we asked for responses within 3 weeks. Now, we self-tabulated it. It wasn't a scientific survey by any means, but it was universally distributed, and it gave us a feel for what were the best services and what were the weakest services.
What was the response? How many did you get back percentage-wise? More or less?
I believe it was less than 1,000. I want to say 600 or 700 is what we got back.
it's more than we got back
That's more, no, that's not bad.
on the other survey, wasn't it?
And it was one of those, you can mail it back, you can bring it back with your water bill.
Yeah.
So that may be something.
But it isn't scientific.
Right, so I think we should consider those
Give it some
options, and as we get a little closer, yeah. But if we do want to do a survey, and we want to actually solicit bids, there's a little bit of time built in there, so maybe if you can consider that in an update to this schedule, just so we have a point at which we need to decide whether to do a survey, and what our options are.
Okay.
With this biannual survey, can you also have an alternative to do the survey online as well? Because I'm someone who doesn't really want to mail it. I don't want to bother. I don't want to take it down either.
Clearly, we would
But I
be-
will do it online.
Clearly, we would be, if we were electronic by then, and it's part of our newsletter.
So that's the advantage of the electronic. 1,400 homes, I mean, that's not that hard to save it.
Quick link.
Yeah.
And I'm going back to our experience. I believe, if I remember correctly, we did one in November of 2007, and we said we were going to do one biannually, and that's why we're scheduling one for October or November of this year. I believe the last one that had been done by the town on a general customer satisfaction survey was 2000 or 2001. So we had such a long gap, we said we don't want to go that long again. We wanted to go biannual. And when I talk about 4 pages and when I talk about the time frames, that's my sphere of influence, was that one time we did it a year and a half ago. We can look to see if electronic is an alternative as well.
That would be great.
So backing out the dates, then, last meeting in September, then, to just discuss about it so we can make a decision one way or the other. That way we have October to produce something and be done by the end of October.
And that's on the issue of, do we or
That's
don't we
right.
want a pre-resolution survey? But I'm sensing that you're interested or willing to proceed with the rest of this, the newsletters and the forums and the...
Yep.
Okay.
I think it's worth letting people know what options are out there and see how they respond to that.
The first will be a recruitment.
The only other thing I was going to mention is I didn't see anything on here about the website. So presumably we'll have some information there.
I guess I am going to ask from town board members if they can attend some of these community meetings, just to put a face on the on the town boards in the interest of that. So whenever those meetings are scheduled, just to see if you can make one or two of them would be great.
Okay. The first one, at least from my take, would be the solicitation for the community members who might be interested in serving on the advisory task force, to get that charged. I mean, that's going to be a group to be appointed by you, but the idea of, are there people in the community that are willing to devote the time to thoroughly study the issue and provide you with a recommendation on it? They may be members of your advisory boards and commissions. I hadn't given thought on whether board members want to serve on it. Probably discourage you from doing that, but...
Maybe past board members.
And putting a solicitation out, everything from the CAC to the website to, for those that are interested, the board is accepting applications for this important task force by September 1st. Okay.
Wouldn't we want to discourage town board members?
We've had that discussion about board members' responsibilities on any of your advisory boards. That's your...
This one was, I think,
This
is
one was-
particularly sensitive.
Yeah.
I agree.
I would recommend discouraging.
Yeah.
I discourage it.
Yeah.
I'm
I'm
definitely
not
discouraging
interested.
it.
I'd rather wait.
Yeah, I agree.
We're going to talk about the size of the task force, or is that something to come?
See how many people raise their
See what kind of interest you have. I mean, I would suggest manageable, and, once it gets beyond 7 or 9, it starts to get a little bit unwieldy, but at the same token, you've got a charter commission that's going to be at least 9 and up to
Right.
21, so, your call, but let's put the call out, and then the board can decide who and how many.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay, great.
We are racing.
We may actually get through this whole thing.
Okay.
7 o'clock.
I had a quick question just about home rule, and you don't have to answer it tonight, but what happens, say, if home rule passes, and we change the election schedule to November, what happens to currently serving board members? Do you know?
And on the charter?
I'm assuming we serve shorter, but,
Well, I don't know, actually. It's a good question. I think that your term, you serve out your term, and there's probably going to be a lag time where you have once your term's finished, then you actually go on to the new schedule, but that's my quick answer.
okay.
Well, there's a gap between April and November, so what happens then?
I don't know.
Does the charter come up with what happens?
Charter might boot us all.
That's a good thought, maybe it's stipulated in the charter about what happens.
It is.
Well, that's what I read.
Or should be,
Or
yes.
should be, yeah.
Yeah.
The Charter Commission should talk about a transition plan. Likewise, if they turned around and said that the number of elected officials was going to be changed, it would deal with the transition.
All the charters that we've seen have a transition period in there. I'm not sure exactly how they would do it, but I'm sure we could work something that's...
Okay.
Or like
They have the ultimate say in how they do it, but...
But some that Eric had suggested too, that maybe part of the charter would be someone from original town or different parts of the town.
Like set up like a
Would be
warrant.
someone from a
Ward
ward
system, yeah.
ward basis.
Ward.
Yeah.
And how
Next
that would,
issue.
how that would transition.
There's another issue if you want to put in actual districts in your charter commission
Right.
as well.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thanks. Oops, excuse me. August 10th agenda?
At this juncture, we only have 2 items, depending on what happens later this evening. But the first is the first reading of an ordinance rezoning the Resolute property. You'll recall that the Resolute is the roughly 15 acres that fronts on Colton between Tyler and the town's eastern limits over by AMC Theater and Flatirons Mall. It used to be owned by the Horizons apartment complex, has been acquired by Resolute year and a half ago. Their zoning petition, which was unanimously recommended by the Planning Commission at its meeting last Tuesday, would change the zoning on the property from CAC, or Community Activity Commercial, to RAC, or Regional Activity Commercial. The list of permitted uses is significantly broader under the RAC and would allow, as an example, for a hotel as a permitted use rather than as a special use. It also allows significantly taller and more dense developments. And based on the board's guidance in the past, you said the bigger the better at that particular location in terms of its mixture of uses, and there wasn't a sensitivity to height, density, or mass there. So we'd kind of given a Resolute an encouragement of this when they came in and made their conceptual plan review. They asked you for 4 things, including financial assistance, donating the extra acre of the master parcel, and some other things. You said this was the one that you were interested and willing to proceed with in advance of any specific development. So it's taking shape. Come to you for first reading on the 10th and second reading and hopefully public hearing and final approval on August 24th. The second one is approving a change order for asphalt and concrete repairs. As you know, we have contractors out doing preliminary work in advance of all of the resurfacing going on in town. Some of the quantities have changed as a result of things that they found in the field. It exceeds my financial authority, so we'll be bringing back a revised quantity to you in a change order for something over and above $25,000. There may be other items that come up, again, based on further discussions that happen later this evening, but at this juncture, those are the only items that we have for the next meeting. Your workshop, we have 2 items. First is the library discussion. Thought it was timely to go ahead and start talking about what the town's options are regarding future library services. We've entered into an intergovernmental agreement with Louisville. It doesn't seem like it's been 2 years, does it? And actually it hasn't been. It was only January that we entered into the revised agreement. But we did say that the town would do one of 2 things by April of 2010. And the first would be to conduct a property tax referendum up for 1.5 mills with the intent that that would be used to extend our agreement with the city of Louisville. It doesn't bind us to, but the board also wanted to look at local options. We've got a lot of detailed information, some of it dated, but in terms of what the costs would be of building a building, putting up a storefront, costs of operation and the like. So we wanted to revisit all of that information in anticipation of going back to the home rule discussion. By January, you're going to have to make a decision. Do we proceed with a referendum in April for a property tax levy, or do we pursue a different course? So we're going to start that discussion in 2 weeks. And the second, very briefly, we're going to be bringing back to the board an update on our solar installations. We've shared with you that the 5 that have already been approved have been installed and are functioning. Soon you will see a corner of the website that's devoted to the meters, showing the meters running backwards as we're generating our own power at our 5 different rooftop installations. But most significantly, we had shared with you before 2 ground-mounted installations, one at the water treatment plant on McCaslin, one at the wastewater treatment plant over east of Rock Creek Parkway. Because of some changes in Public Utility Commission ruling and Excel rules, we're going to be recommending that we significantly increase the size of those ground-mounted solar installations. Excel's rebate program used to be limited. They didn't provide rebates for systems above 99 kilowatt generation capacity. On September 1st, those rules are amended, effectively amended, and they will now be providing rebates for systems up to 500 kW. We specifically sized our water and wastewater treatment plants facilities to 100 kW to take the maximum benefit of the Excel rebates. But now that the rebates are greater, we think it's advantageous to look at bigger systems. So the consultants and staff have come up with a plan that have a almost 400 kilowatt system at the water treatment plant and a 500 kilowatt system at the wastewater treatment plant. Significantly greater price tags, but we want you to see what it looks like, what the installations would look like. Share it with the community so that they can see what these installations are. We'll be coming back later with either purchase agreements, power purchase agreements, or how we would go about financing those. We wanted just to share everybody that at one point it looked like 4 cells, and now all of a sudden we've got 44 cells. How did it get so large? How did it take up so much land? And are you comfortable with devoting that much land to solar installations at those 2 properties? So we'll be bringing that to you at the next meeting as well.
Great. My thoughts about that, we need to make sure that we specifically identify or notify the residents up on the ridge and down at
Saddlebrook.
So, just so they're aware. Assume they'd be in supportive of it, but you never know for sure.
I'm having a difficult time visualizing the water treatment plant and how visible it would be from any of the units at the ridge. We spent a lot of time out at Saddlebrook, and it will be invisible from Saddlebrook because of the high change in elevation. It's actually built into the hillside, and what might have been at one point ground cover will now be, but it'll have more of a visual impact from the horizons looking north than it would from Saddlebrook looking south.
Yeah. Well, just so that we don't want it to be a surprise to anybody. It never should be a surprise since it's an open discussion, but if we can specifically notify those people for comment, I think it would be helpful.
Okay.
Thanks. Excellent work session. Thoughts? Anything from the board? You just
Any thoughts on the weekly digest? Are you going to go through that, or is it pretty self-explanatory?
We gave you the information about the storm damage. We did lose 10 trees. It wasn't nearly as severe as it was in the storms of the summer of 2007, but it was still significant. Construction did commence today at the roundabout. And then we had some information following up from the last meeting. Original town drainage, the question that came up, we could only surmise what the question or the complaint was, and we think it had to do with enclosing a swale on the north side of Coal Creek Drive between Fifth Avenue and Sagamore. And then Eric's question about what's the proper way of disposing of CFLs. We do have 2 meetings coming up. We have a meeting in this room tomorrow night as part of the Boulder County Climate Smart program. It's a mandatory meeting for anybody that wants to take advantage of Boulder County's low-interest rate loan program for energy efficiency improvements to residential properties. This is the second round of funding. The first round of funding, I believe they committed about $8.5 million, and I believe there were 5 applicants from the town of Superior. So there were a lot more people in attendance at the workshop than actually made application. We're hoping that there might be greater participation in the second round of funding applications, but that meeting is tomorrow. And the second one has to do with National Night Out. It's a joint program between the town and the Boulder County Sheriff's Department. It's a crime prevention program, and it is scheduled for Tuesday, August 4th, a week from next Tuesday at Community Park. There's information on the website. There are posters around town. You've got information in front of you in terms of it's a officer-friendly, feel-good, but it's an effort to kind of expand upon neighborhood watch programs and creating a sense of community. It's an initiative that has predominantly been run by the Sheriff's Department. We're underwriting it financially and allowing the use of our facilities, but excited about the possibility of adding a small, localized neighborhood type of event in Community Park. And if it has any, I'd encourage you all to attend, but if there's any following to it whatsoever, we hope it's something that we might be able to grow.
And are you putting a banner up?
I was going to say, are we putting on our electronic message board?
The electronic message board is supposed to be installed by the middle of August, and it will be operational by Labor Day. So no, it won't be on the message board. I just had conversations after 5 o'clock tonight about the prospect of a banner. I don't know whether they're interested in going to the expense of creating one and whether we can get it up. We'd have to contact the Fire Protection District about it. It's a possibility.
What time was the workshop tomorrow night?
6 to 8 here at Town Hall.
Okay. Anything from anybody?
Nope. Wow.
Take 10 minutes, I guess. First time ever we're actually
No.
running early.
Start the meeting early, we can be done at 7.
July 27, 2009, and Phyllis, if you'd call the roll.
Sure. Mayor Andrew Miller,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Lisa Skumatz, Trustees Joe Sorelli,
Here.
Dana D'Souza,
Here.
Elia Dolores.
Here.
Eric Rosenfeld.
Here.
Deborah Williams.
Here.
Town Manager Scott Randall.
Here.
Town Attorney Jeff Parker.
I'm here.
Town Clerk Joel Sargent.
Thank you. Item number 3, approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda. By Trustee Rosenfeld, second by Trustee Gregouris. Discussion. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Item number 4, presentations tonight. We have one presentation from the Open Space Advisory Committee, recommendations for town requests to Boulder County 2010 Open Space Acquisition and Trails, and welcome, John.
Thank you very much. My name is John Nybarger. I live at 1514 Weldona Way. I'm the chairman of the Open Space Advisory. I think that'll work. This is a presentation is on our recommendations to Boulder County for their open space and trails. Every year, Boulder County solicits from all of its member municipalities information on which open space properties that those municipalities are interested in having acquired or help with from Boulder County Open Space, and also trails. And so this presentation is just a quick short history of some of the partnerships we've had in our open space acquisitions, and also an updated open space and an updated trails request. So I wanted to just point this out because I'm still sort of amazed every time I look at it. We've had three major properties that we've purchased. The town has spent $4.9 million on these properties. We've gotten $4.9 million from Boulder County. These are sort of makes it look like a match. It's actually not. As you can see in the above areas, they sort of came out about that way. And then also, of course, 1.9 from Boulder City, which of course we're very grateful for. So we've had a very successful open space program and partnered very well with the county. And we want to, of course, keep that good working relationship going. So our open space acquisition request, the first two items are the same as they were for last year. The first one's down in the bottom. This is the level 3 property. The second one is the Bulljack property, which is right next to the Verhay parcel that was, of course, protected for open space recently. The third one is one that we've added. It came through some discussions that we've had quite a long time ago, and more recently, some residents in Saddlebrook have brought it up as well. And that is the area adjacent to the Hotchkin-Harris Reservoir. So that's you can see where number 3 is up there. And the reservoir that's there is owned by the county, but the land around it is, up to the north and west, is what we call the Zaharias parcel. And the interest is trying to create a boardwalk that would partially go around the reservoir for the purpose of viewing migratory birds. It's apparently, and I've seen it myself, a very rich area for wildlife, and especially migratory birds. And so being able to have that type of draw would be rather nice. The last one, number 4, isn't on this map, and it's a lot farther out, and most likely things aren't moving forward on this. Well, right now there is no movement forward on this. It's been dropped, but there's this parcel called Section 16, which is adjacent to the Rocky Flats property, and I have a picture of that later. And this is a rather important piece, both from the ecology perspective of continuous open space, and also, to not use the indelicate term, but it's got some very old dirt. It's got some really some very specially preserved areas that for other ecological reasons we'd like to see protected. So our trails requests are very similar to what we had last year. In fact, I think these first 4 are the same. The first one is the continued work on the Colton Trail, the Colton Trailhead, which of course is number 2. Number 1 is the trail going from Original Town down to that new trailhead that's supposed to commence work on this fall. The third one is a connection from Original Town to the Marshall Mesa area. And with the connection 1 and 3 completed, there will be an entire loop that would go from Superior to Marshall Mesa and then back through Superior, which I think is, I'm trying to remember the mileage, it's something like 16 miles of
16 or
trails.
17 of
Yeah,
it.
it's quite phenomenal. All the interior all being protected open space.
Hey, John, can I ask you a question just while that map is up? I thought the alignment for 3 was slightly different the last time I looked at it. Is this a new alignment, or is this just...
No, this is from 9 of 07. So this is from the management plan for the land that's there. I can't remember the technical term for it. I guess it's the Marshall Superior Colton.
I thought for
area.
some reason I remembered there's the potential neighborhood connection behind
Right.
Sagamore.
There's
I
the-
thought that was going farther out, and then was going to be a loop there, but I certainly...
Yeah,
be re-
I think the final alignment hasn't been done yet, and there's also some issues with the ditch company and being able to go over the ditch. I think there's an existing bridge at one location
Oh, I
which
see.
they'd like to use, but it changes the alignment. So this is more of, you could just sort of have a nice even curve that would just give the general idea for it. This is just the one they had from 2007
Okay.
when they first originally thought about it.
Okay.
And I think that trail had was funded with a GOCO grant. I think it was for about $10,000 to start looking into some of the initial planning for it. But no funding has come forward from the commissioners yet, or there hasn't been any commitment yet to do that. Just to step back just a little bit, where these four trails and now in the fifth one fit in, you can see the existing open space and trails are trail request 1, 2, 3, and 4. And now I've included a new one for trail request number 5, and this is a trail that would start from the, I haven't included it, I should say, it's the Open Space Advisory Committee making the recommendation, but I did the map, so. The trail goes from due south from the Colton Trailhead and skirts the eastern side of the Verhey parcel. And this was something that was fought for to be included in the original agreement for the Verhey parcel, to be able to have a trail allowed on that eastern side. So the idea would be to go from the Colton Trailhead to then go south and wrap around to be able to connect to Rocky Flats, which you can see much better in now this image. So now the area circled in blue on the right, you can see those possible trail alignments. Now these are very rough trail alignments, as you can probably tell, to be able to connect into the greater Rocky Flats Trail Network. Now again, this is from the Rocky Flats National Wildlife Refuge from the webpage. This was one of their brochures, and as far as I know, these are very preliminary alignments, and they're not by any means finalized as far as I know. And also on this map now you can see I've highlighted in blue in the upper part where the Section 16 parcel is. So you can see how that sort of completes that section of land, and of course it also has the important ecological features as well. So the action that OSAC is requesting is to have approval of these open space and trails requests. There's a deadline for August 11th. We were actually able to get an extension from Boulder County, and your next meeting where this could be on would be on August 10th. So we asked that to be included on the consent agenda.
Thanks very much. Questions? I had just maybe a couple. So the Zaharias property, if that were, I can't quite identify how big the request is for. I mean, is it just for a boardwalk next to it, and could that be part of a development plan? Is it part of the whole? Is it the whole area, or?
Well, to be honest, the idea comes from a few angles. One was the one I mentioned before about the boardwalk and the migratory bird habitat and viewing, and people from Saddlebrook that are interested in seeing something going on there. Another aspect of this is we have included this on a previous request, and Boulder County said they weren't interested in buying or helping to buy the entire parcel. And so this is another way to try and protect that, that important riparian and wildlife corridor, or that area that's along there. So we're sort of seeing what Boulder County thinks of that idea. And they might not think that's a good one. Maybe they'd like to have more detail, as you're asking. I think the actual the alignment, for instance, of a boardwalk or the size of it, we haven't sat down with maps and gone through any of those details. But seeing that in a broader development picture would be very interesting in terms of open space dedications, for instance, and whatnot. So I mean, we're very open to that ideas as well.
Okay. So this isn't written in stone about purchasing things. It's just kind of
No,
a
this is just sort of
big picture.
Hey, this is a neat idea. Maybe no one had thought of this before. Let's see what they think. Let's see what you guys think as well. Is this something you'd like us to pursue and to be able to present some recommendations for?
And for other acquisition questions, so there's a few properties, and you mentioned Section 16 is, I mean, I think that generally there's been support for it, but it's hard to know where that is since
Right.
the land board, I'm not sure where the land board is with this all. And then there's other areas identified for purchase, and we don't even know if we have a willing seller. So how does the county respond to that? Do you have a feeling, or it's...
Well, I think the process is we put forward our recommendations. They look at sort of what their wish list is, and if there's some alignment there, then they look at some partnerships. Of course, it always comes down to a willing seller and how one can actually structure that type of financial deal. So yeah, it's not a. I mean, there's nothing really written in stone. It's just sort of, well, what would you guys like to see? And well, we think these various parcels for these various reasons should be acquired and protected for open space. And so it's sort of I think in the end it could be a bit of a conversation back and forth, and ultimately it comes down to, is there a willing seller and are there funds for the purchase?
And I know that you're not speaking for the commissioners, but does this go into the commissioners' wish list book or master plan, or what's the end product of their action?
That's a good question. I'm not sure of the internal workings within between the Board of Commissioners and the Open Space Department.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Other questions from the board? Okay. Thanks a lot.
Just
Thanks
like
for all
to
your
comment.
hard work.
Thank you for long support in this area.
Yeah.
It was a good presentation today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you. Item number 5, public comment on consent agenda and non-agenda items.
Gladys, 444 Southwood Avenue. I wasn't in here. Could you tell me what happened with item 6E on the approval of the agenda? Was it approved or pulled or?
On the consent agenda, nothing's been removed from the consent agenda.
Okay, so that means then that item 6E has been approved for Flatirons Building Services, Inc. for the street sweeping?
Not yet,
We haven't
technically,
approved it.
but we haven't got to
not
the
been
consent
pulled.
agenda yet.
Okay, so when that comes up, will public be able to have comment on that?
This would be the time.
This would be the time? Okay. Well, in reading the packet, I'm sorry to see that there wasn't open bidding on this. I was glad to see the other figures that, I guess it was last year. But I just think that that needs to be an item for open bidding. And I am very sorry to see Flatirons Building Services, Inc. considered because of the poor job that they have done. I mean, there is just absolutely no reason at all for the dust flying with all of with the street sweeping that they have done. So I think that the bidding needs to be open and that looked at again. I have a couple of comments on the work session. Would it be possible to make comments on that? Okay. On the enhanced communication plan, number 1, to expand the content on the town website for the monthly, quarterly financial reports. I think that would be superb, because that is something that the residents have asked for, to be able to review, and we've never been able to get that. So I'm very glad to see that that is one thing that is being considered and hopefully will be done. And then number 8, the executive session minutes. You all know my opinion about the executive session. And so one more time, I just want to say, I understand the executive sessions. I can tolerate the executive sessions if we are told what those are about. There is no reason at the time that those executive sessions are held that we cannot be told what it is about, i.e., okay, we're having an executive session, arsenal property. That's all the residents want to know. What in the hell is the executive session about? Otherwise, it is a thorn in a lot of people's sides. So I would like to see you consider the fact of just, like I say, okay, you're going to discuss the personnel, you're going to discuss town manager, public works, rec, whatever. As long as we know, a lot of us can handle that a lot better. So I would like to see you consider that. Let's see, is that, okay, then on the other one I have one other question. On the personal improvements, number 3, these quarterly meetings, or excuse me, number 2, I'm so sorry, the monthly meetings with the manager, is this for the town board or is this for the public?
These are public meetings, but
It is the
this is a
public?
work in progress, but yes, it's for the public.
Okay, but I just needed to have that clear. I didn't understand that. Okay. Then, to the home rule, I'm extremely concerned about the fact that both sides of home rule information is put out. And I'm glad to see some of these things that are outlined here, the task force, the Sentinel, the public meetings. I'm very glad to see that. I do have a problem with the town hall debate with the League of Women Voters. They never, if you have a panel and you submit questions, the League of Women Voters change those questions. They are not submitted to the panel the way that the residents submit them. The League of Women Voters always changes the question. And I have seen this time and time again. And so I have a great deal of concern about that. As far as the debate, I think that's super, but I think you need to cut the League of Women Voters out. Worst comes to shove, I'll volunteer to be on that committee of notification and education, but I'm really concerned about both sides of this home rule situation being thrown out, because so far a lot of the residents think that it's biased, it's for only. The election is the only thing that anybody has heard anything about, and I think that's wrong. So that's my 2 cents worth on that. I have one question. I had understood that there was going to be a redo, I'm not sure what the right terminology is, of the alley in the south end of town for vehicle access to that one block. And I want to know if a date has been set to do that work.
No.
Then I am submitting a letter to the town board and to you, Mr. Mayor, regarding this alley. And just so the general public will have a basic consensus what this letter is about. It's an imperative issue that no correction to the vehicle access has been done because there's a rights violation, a public health issue, and I'm asking that this issue be corrected within a 2-week time period to allow vehicle access to that alley.
Actually, why don't you skip to Phyllis? So just an update about the alleys. I have asked the board to talk about the alleys in a more global perspective and not just one particular alley, and I think that my request was to do this sometime in fall to have a bigger picture. So I'm still planning on that suggestion, if that sounds reasonable to everybody. So, okay. Additional public comment, consent agenda, non-agenda items. Welcome, George.
George Cutler, 109 South Fourth. Previously, I've asked the board to put some information out on the town bills, and we have nothing yet come forth of this. Are we going to have the information we want without me having to pay for it and I don't get what I need? I think all public bills should be published once, just like everybody else. We're getting a bigger town. There was never any mention of the change orders down on the south end of town. That alley's a separate alley, Mr. Mayor, other than the other alleys. You contract that out, let's just get it fixed. It's wrong, you all looked at it, we know it's wrong. What's the hold up, you people? I mean, right's right and wrong's wrong.
Okay.
But I really would like something done on these bills for the general public. I really would, so they'll know what the town board's spending, what the town's spending, and where we stand. Please, can we get that done? Even if it's in a box out here, you come down and read it, or whatever.
Okay. I have to.
Please? I've been asking for this for...
I'm not agreeing to anything in particular, so when you say...
You know what I'm talking about, though.
I do know exactly what you're talking about. So I think currently, Mr. Randall, you have to have a request for this now. Is that where we're at? I forget the process exactly.
Yes, I believe the only financial report besides the budget that's currently available on the website and the like is the Finance Department's quarterly financial. And don't even hold me to that. I believe it is made available, though. This particular request is, I want to see the bills that are getting paid. We're not publishing the bills. We've provided, as a result of Freedom of Information requests, monthly financials showing what bills have been paid. I believe the last report was 11 pages, and it's probably at 25 cents a page.
Okay.
We did talk earlier tonight about the prospect of that being one of the things that we might be including on the enhanced website. Mm-hmm. Certainly, it's one of the suggestions that we'd come up with. But if you don't have access to web or you're not interested in accessing the web, I'm not sure if it's going to satisfy your concern.
Okay.
But it was discussed earlier this evening.
Right. All right.
I just had one other question somebody answered.
Okay.
Who's in charge of how these streets are done? We got a 6-inch curb up there, and the original town is supposed to have pans, okay? Who changed this? I have no idea, but the general public, when we first come out, did not want curbs. They wanted pans. Why can't we follow through with what we have? Are you going to rip them all out, or what are you going to do? That ain't what we want. There's a 6-inch curb from...
George,
you know what I'm talking about?
I don't, and I just can't answer this right at the particular moment. I'm happy to sit down, and I'm happy to talk to you about it, but I just can't answer this.
Is that the engineer?
Why don't you talk to me about it so we can understand? Great, thanks.
George Kuffner of 7520 West Colquitt Drive. Good evening, board. I have a couple of questions. I've kind of been watching our pavement rejuvenation up in the subdivision there. And they're roto-milling 2 inches at the curb, and they're peaking it off to nothing, and they're doing that from both sides. And I'm wondering why they're changing the plane of the road, put more of a belly to it, so I guess we can slide off of it. And then my other question is when you roto-mill something, it's to take the impurities out, the little bumps or the whatnots out of it. You take them out when you roto-mill them out, and when you put the 2-inch of new asphalt over it, you've got a nice flat surface. All the impurities are supposed to be gone. The memory's gone because you put a new one in. So, I mean, why are we bubbling our road? So we're going from 2 inches to nothing with the rotomill, and then 2 inches to nothing, and then we're capping it. Presume with the whole 2 inches. I hope we're getting our whole 2 inches. But what we're doing is we're bellying our road. So we're changing the pitch. So we're making it like this instead of somewhat. Some of them are tapered one way or the other so that the water runs to the gutters. But now we're doing this belly deal. So actually we're rotomilling less than half of the whole street that we're paying for a rotomill job. And I didn't.
I suspect nobody, this would be one of these things where, I guess my only request is if someone could forewarn me about these questions or give me a call prior to the meeting, I don't think that anybody here can answer that particular question. And I'm happy to talk to you or you about specific questions about infrastructure. I just can't.
I hate to bother you at home.
It's never a bother.
Who's decided to change the elevation of our streets? I mean, we said we were just going to rotomill them. So if I was going to rotomill 2 inches, we take 2 inches across, and we come back in with 2 inches more pavement, and then we're back to our plane. Not with a 2-inch here and then a belly and come back down in. And I'm just, somebody that should run somebody's attention.
I'm happy to talk to you about these things. I can get information and call me at home. I'm always happy to talk to people at home. Mr. Randall,
I'll need to speak to RG and find out. I understand the observation and the insinuation. Whether there's any accuracy in it or not, I don't know. But I'll find out.
Okay.
But nobody's here tonight to respond to that.
Right. This goes back to the work session where the board has to have a way to, well, you brought it up previously. We don't have to wait to the every other Monday meeting to have the discussion, and we have to have some way to respond to these. So I don't think anybody can respond to that tonight. So.
Okay. I guess my other way would be find somebody to come down with me and talk to the town manager so that we don't have two different directions of the creek. So we have like a mediator say, well, yeah, they were decent with each other, or no, he wasn't. Because
I wasn't suggesting a personal meeting with the town manager.
Well, I mean, who else? If I don't come down and talk to him about it, call you at home?
Yeah, exactly. You can always call me at home, and I would recommend that to everybody. So, and hopefully, we would get a process where we can respond to these when we have information at every other meeting.
Can I make
Trustee
it?
D'Souza, yes.
I just also, if you emailed us, say, last Friday or something before this, we could actually have a chance to look into it if you want an answer at this meeting. I mean, we can't, as the mayor said, we can't respond instantly right now. If you had let us know, we could have looked into it.
I think, George, that's one way to eliminate your own frustration by coming up here and for you too, George, then not getting the answers that you want. So if we have something ahead of time, we can do the research and then give you the answers that you desire right here and then if we can. And that will eliminate some of the frustrated looks.
Can I reply to that?
I hope I didn't open up Pandora's box, but...
bills, not just tonight.
And I think we have a process.
And I haven't got an answer.
Well, we have a process, and I think you get the bills. I think you just aren't happy with the process. So, this is an ongoing discussion.
Flip it over, please, sir?
Yes. Thank you. Additional public comment and consent agenda and non-agenda items. Okay. Seeing none, item number 6, the consent agenda is approval of the minutes of the July 13th, 2009 meetings, acceptance of the minutes of the Historical Commission and Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Trails Advisory Committee meetings, final reading of an ordinance amending Section 1-78 of the Superior Municipal Code regarding the collection of municipal court assessments, adoption of a resolution approving an agreement with Highway Technologies, Inc. for epoxy street striping, a motion to approve an extension with contract with Flatirons Building Services, Inc. for street sweeping, and adoption of a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement with Boulder County regarding the McCaslin Boulevard Colton Road intersection project. Entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda by Trustee Gregorus. Thank you. Second by Trustee D'Souza. Discussion.
I'd like
Trustee
to
Williams.
abstain from the minutes
Okay.
for July 13th meeting.
Same here.
Trustee Cirilli, thank you.
Just one quick question. I actually had this question coming in, and it was a comment that was also made. I'm assuming for the street sweeping, consistent with our policy, we'll go to bid, was it next year? Is it every 3 or 4 years?
policy says no less frequently than 4. It used to be 5, but when the board adopted its purchasing policy, no less than 4. If we think that there's a lot of
Less
potential,
than 4, so that would be 2011.
worst case, if we're either not satisfied with service, if they come forward with a price adjustment that we didn't think could be supported,
No more than 4?
no more than 4.
Right.
This will be the third year.
Right, okay. Yes.
And I'm just curious, in the contract, is there a minimum water usage or a maximum water usage? Is there any kind of information on that?
Not that I'm aware of, there are references to standards, and I know
Okay.
when the references have come up about clouds of
Yeah.
dust.
Can I finish my comment first?
Were you done?
If you don't mind.
I'm sorry.
So, no, I wasn't done. Yeah, so I was going to ask, that presumably then, we'd either go to bid next year or the year after, and again, depending on what the board wants to do at that point. So we're not in violation of our bid policy.
Absolutely not.
And just a note, I've received comments that the street sweeping person is doing perfectly well. So I don't think it's a fair statement to say that it's a true fact that everything is, with street sweeping, is being done poorly. So I've heard that people say street sweeping is just fine, there is no dust, they don't have any complaints. So I think just wanted to provide that comment because I haven't, except for one person, I haven't heard anything else about the problems with street sweeping, and I've heard the opposite, actually. So.
Okay, thank you. Additional comments, Trustee Williams?
Thank you. So to clarify, there is a standard.
There's a standard, I don't believe it talks about gallons per lineal mile or any of that. I don't know if John is still here or not. Are you familiar with the standard?
There is none.
My apologies.
Okay. Trustee D'Souza?
Well, maybe I shouldn't
You're
say
on the
anything, I don't know.
So there won't be cost tonight.
Just a comment on that same one, that, I guess just to reflect what Trustee Rosenfeld said, is that the reason I didn't pull this one is because also in the beginning, there, I had heard some complaints on it, but I think that we spoke with them, and that was taken care of, and so I haven't heard from people I've talked to around the community any other problems with that one, so.
Okay, thank you. Additional comments? If none, Phyllis?
Mr. Rowley?
Yes, with the abstention on the minutes.
Okay, D'Souza?
Yes.
Gregorius?
Yes.
Buckle?
Yes.
Rosenfeld?
Yes.
Williams?
Yes.
Thank you very much. With that, we're on to item number 7, reports, questions, and issues. Trustee Williams, do you want to start?
I have nothing to report at the moment.
Okay. Trustee Gregorius?
Just some commentary as far as the street surfacing is concerned. I understand what you're talking about, but at least in our neighborhood, I've had a lot of people that have been very appreciative. They like it. They feel like it was done in the time frame that, within one day. So I've heard actually positive comments for once. So I just want to pass it along, just like you. I think it's important for us to share with you when we hear positive comments from the community about what's taking place. It helps balance the view.
Trustee D'Souza?
Only that I had attended a DRCOG meeting, and I think there was a write-up on our information, so I don't know if the public has gotten this about, that we did approve a $25 million CDOT Region 6 that will reconstruct a portion of US 36 for continued maintenance as part of the American Recoveries Act. One of the things that Rudy down at DRCOG wanted to know, because individual communities can apply for the TIGER grants, and TIGER being the transportation, generation, infrastructure generation,
of
economic recovery,
Yeah.
which is why we say TIGER. But that individual communities or groups can apply for that, and he's just asking for us all to report back that if we do have any intention or not of applying for those grants, just so that DRCOG can have foreknowledge of that. And one of the things I was wondering about, I guess for next vote, Bill Vidal has suggested that in order to get more funding for the DRCOG region, that we kind of get behind one or two projects. I mean, right now, there's just multiple projects out there, that we get between one or two projects, as they did sort of before with T-Rex, in order to get something through, so that when we ask the government for money, that we have, instead of trying to spread it out all over. Obviously, I think US 36 should be one of those projects, but the other thing is like Denver Union Station, and so I just kind of wanted to get a feel. You don't necessarily have to answer now, but if you have any idea on what we should do about that and how much we should push for that, I'd be happy to hear back from people on that. But we did get a lot of favorable comments. I mean, I think most of the region realizes that 36 is an important part of transportation that has been overlooked for a long time. And CDOT actually was very forthcoming about wanting to move forward with getting things done on 36. So that was good. The other comment I had, and this is, I guess, towards Park and Rec. So people have been asking me about some of the different parks around and some of the things that are coming up. But one of the things that was brought to my attention is we have a lot of kids in the Superior area that can't get onto our ball fields for practice because we have one of the few electrical outlets on the ball field, and so those teams in the area that use an automated pitching system, they get the priority for that. And so I've talked to several people who are in Superior and never get to play on Superior fields. And they asked me why we have an area at Town 9 that we're not programming. And so for those people who have insisted that we don't program that, I would like to hear back from you the answer of why should neighborhood kids be forced to go to Lafayette to practice when we have an area here. So I know I'm probably opening myself up for a lot of angry comments, but I would really like to hear an honest answer so that I can give that to people. So that's all I have.
Thanks. Let's see. I didn't go to a Washington, D.C. meeting with US 36 mayors. They were there earlier this week, maybe, or the end of last week, applying for not the Tiger Grants, the ARRA, or I don't remember what the acronym is anymore for.
American Recovery.
And met with the Assistant Secretary of Transportation, and it was favorably received. And they said, "Oh, those are all the great ideas that we'd like, and don't count that you'll be getting $250 million because we're trying to spread out a whole bunch of money throughout the country." So, we'll see how our application goes, but it's probably not going to fund the corridor. Interestingly that you brought this up, so I had a conversation with some people from youth baseball who are interested in having we have a regulation for big kids field down at the park. They were interested in the little kids regulation field, which are shorter bases and a shorter outfield. And they said, "Well, what do you think about Town 9?" I said, "Well, it's an interesting idea, and I can't really say one or the other, but I think it would solve a whole bunch of issues. One, it would provide access to kids in the area to be able to play baseball, and it would also provide a regulation field for little kid baseball. So it's interesting that you had that.
Yeah, that's good.
And I heard that CDOT commissioners, after a 2-day public opening for public comment, approved the I don't remember the terminology, but basically the system for the Northwest Parkway, which doesn't mean that they approved the roadway, but approved the concept of that and allowed it to go forward. So that was, the Jefferson Parkway.
Oh, okay.
So it was very disconcerting that they had a 2-day opening for public comment and it closed before anybody knew about it. But so that's ongoing. So it'd be good to keep abreast of that particular issue. That's all I had. Trustee Rosenfeld.
Yeah, just a couple questions. And this is mostly just to make note of this. I traded some emails with town staff and the town manager about getting work sessions onto our website for the streaming. And I was most interested in getting the speech that Sam Bannett gave on home rule. And I guess that's going to be up on our website hopefully in the next couple days.
We recorded that meeting on June 8th, Sam's presentation, for the benefit of those board members that weren't here. So we're trying an experiment to replay the CD and then use that as an ability to start the web stream. So we're trying. Can't promise, but we should know by tomorrow on whether we can get that one on.
Okay. And I wanted to ask a more general question. Are we going to start putting work sessions, now that they're being broadcast on Channel 8, also on the web stream?
Yes.
Okay.
The question comes down to our contract with our third-party service provider and the volume of that. So how long of an archive, that kind of stuff. We're coming forward with a recommendation during the upcoming budget that we significantly increase that contract so that we can absorb that increased data. But as a result, we'll check the website today as a result of your conversation, and you can see in the archive the last workshop session.
Okay.
It's not noted any differently. It starts at 6 o'clock and then it continues at the 7 o'clock meeting and the adjournment at 7:55. It's all in one.
That's
the
why
town meeting
Okay.
of July 13th includes the work. So we're working on making sure that we have the capacity to archive both of those.
Okay.
And it was a personal observation that we could probably do a better job by distinguishing between the workshop and the regular town board meeting.
I should have clicked on one, but I was just looking for a title that said workshop session. Okay. And kind of a broader question then, when you talk about capacity, is that just related in volume of storage? Is that just related to the video, or is it for all things on our website?
It's for all things on the website, but the archiving, the video archiving of our meetings, I'm told, is the largest bulk.
Okay. Because I was also looking for some material around the parks proposal that we saw at the last work session, and from time to time, as I start to dig for stuff on our website, so mostly so I can refer other people to it, it's hard to find or it's not there. And so I just wanted to kind of reiterate that, and I think we'll probably, I'd like to make sure we push for getting as much material, whether it's presented at a workshop or in a board meeting, available electronically, so anybody can access it. So.
That particular presentation by both Parks and Rec staff as well as the engineers and ProStack is on that video. But it still has the grainy appearance because you're looking at it as if you were looking at it on TV.
So now that I know it's there, I can refer to that, but it would also be nice to have the material available in some fashion. So, because I think a lot of people are going to want to, if you refer them to it, they're going to want to read it, not look at a grainy video.
And hear a verbal presentation.
Yeah. Okay, so those are a couple things that I wanted to bring up. Have we heard anything back from the US 36 design team in relation to Dr. Cog? They were supposed to look at our alternate proposal by the end of this month.
They have not. I believe that meeting was on June 30th. 4 weeks would be this coming Friday.
Right.
No, we've not heard anything. We have not heard anything back. I have had one additional meeting with our traffic engineer, Mr. Ianello. It's a report that I'm preparing for at least the committee members, if not the full board, showing what his analysis is, both of the cost estimates and the propriety of the loop. It reinforces everything we've talked about before. The most exciting information was he thinks the cost estimates for the loop are incredibly high and can be accomplished more in line with what the bridge widening would be.
The braided loop or?
The braided loop.
So they think he says they're estimating high.
Yes. We've been using a $10 to $12 million order of magnitude. He thinks it's more of a $6 to $7 million order of magnitude compared to the $5 to $5.5 million for the bridge widening and the double left turn lane.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I'll be getting all of that to you in anticipation of another meeting with Louisville.
Okay, fantastic. Great, thank you.
Speaking of that, can I just break in? So I think that just about interchanges. There was Louisville had a meeting about their landscape over there. Does anybody know what happened?
Yes. And unfortunately, I received the information from Parks and Rec right after your last digest went out. They were interested in the concepts, but not willing to proceed with anything until the intersection design was concluded.
On the
On the loop, right.
That makes sense.
But they liked the treatments. They were probably more appreciative, it sounded like, of the lesser intensive and the less expensive, and agreed that whatever we do, we should do on both sides. But they weren't interested in doing anything unless and until we brought closure to the loop design, or, excuse me, Phase 2 design, not the loop.
All right, great, thanks. Sorry, Trustee Cirilli.
Two things, just as an aside. When I was away last month, I got to drive across the country, first through Route 90 and then back on Route 80. I can personally report that there's a lot of stimulus traffic jams out there. Particularly Route 80 through Nebraska is,
Oh, no.
That's what everyone drives on.
yeah, so if you're going,
In a couple
plan
of days.
ahead. Secondly, the chairman of the, chairperson of the Planning Commission, John Craycraft, was here earlier, but couldn't stay, and he asked me to bring up the issue of the Planning Commission and Chapter 16 once again, and that, it's fair, it was in their last meeting on Chapter 16, which was on June 2nd, the Planning Commission actually passed a motion, which is in the minutes I have here, and this is what they are essentially asking for. And Matt, I apologize for not having had a chance to talk to you about this before the meeting, but I was just asked while I was up here to bring this up. That they would continue working on Chapter 16 as they have been, and using the staff process that has been put together thus far on a chapter-by-chapter basis, with the addition of a deletions report, which I haven't been able to check with you, Matt, to know how, if or how that can come and how hard that is. So again, I'm speaking to Matt Magley, the members of the public, I apologize for that. So that was one piece, and they were asking for town legal counsel support for the review of Chapter 16 to continue, and they pick up where they left off with legal counsel present. That is what they would like to see, and if the budget can't support it, and since June 2nd, I don't think I have any idea whether the budget could support that or not, then the request would be that they hold the efforts off until such time, maybe the next fiscal year or whatever, that when the budget could support those items. And that's where the Planning Commission was at on that. And they really would like some feedback from the board, I guess, on, well, first, I guess the town manager has to address whether there's budget to support the attorney present. And Scott, I imagine, catching you off guard tonight, you probably can't address that tonight, but secondly, if council can't be present at the meetings while they're addressing Chapter 16, could this be put off until such time as it could be, that could be funded?
3 or 4 questions that got raised there. First of all, Planning Commission did ask for the edits or deletes report. Matt tells me that he ran it last week, and it produced, besides being somewhat confusing, it was in excess of 500 pages. He's done it and is prepared to distribute it to the Planning Commission. We think it gums up the works, but let them come to that conclusion rather than take our word for it.
You're not going to print that all up, are you?
Pardon me?
You're not going to print that all up, are you?
All electronic copies, hopefully.
I don't know of anybody's system that... Anyway, he produced one copy, and it was in excess of 500 pages. We did distribute information at the end of June after Mr. Nillis and I went through the years to date for all of the significant revenue streams. And we shared that in communications with the board. It said basically that the recommended budget adjustments that had been made effective on March 1st should stay. One of those, when we cut roughly $425,000 in current year funding for various projects, included reducing the allowance for legal counsel on the rewrite of the entire municipal code. To date, we reduced it from 50 to 25,000. To date, we've spent about 23 and change. Last time I looked, we had $1,600 or $1,800 left to complete the task. There are 2 chapters, 16 and 1. 1 is the intro, that we're waiting to get done. And it was our plan, our task, to get this done in 2 years. So it was our intention to get it done by the end of the year. If the board wants to defer it to next year to see if we have the funds in order to continue the more traditional approach, we can do that. The Plan Commission can do as they've been asked. Or if they choose not to, which we've had some time, sometimes where individual Planning Commission members have actually refused to participate in the process with the information that they've been given, that if the board was hell-bent on getting it done this year, we could do it this year, and the board could do it without the benefit of their Planning Commission advice. I'm not recommending one course over the other, but you had a 2-year time limit. We're on target to do the 2-year time limit. We could delay it to 2.5 years if we wanted to, and see, and I can't tell you whether funding's there for 2010 or not.
I'll tell you, I was at the meeting on June 2nd, and the purpose of this motion was that if the board could do what was asked for in this motion, regardless of the opinion of a couple of commissioners about whether they can work with what they have, or not, the majority of the commission was ready to go forward. So, but I think, this is my personal, and what they were asking for too, I think they are not going to be able to do it to their satisfaction correctly without council present at the meetings. And I personally would prefer to see us defer the completion of this until we can fund it to be done with their recommendation. It's their specific charter, and it's a complicated area. So that's my thoughts on it. I don't know whether we need to have that as an agenda item or take it up now or what, but I'd like to offer them our support to, if we, recognizing we have funding problems, but plan to fund it the way that it can be done best. And I think with council there for at least the Chapter 16 review would be the way to get it done best.
Trustee D'Souza?
I thought that we had suggested once before, and I don't know if this is from the whole board, that they sort of, I guess, a compromise of that they do as much as they can without legal counsel and sort of save up their questions so that we can condense the amount of time that legal counsel is there?
That was sort of the process they were trying to follow. It was not getting anywhere. They just would get hung up and spend the whole meeting debating what the questions were and not moving forward. It really was a frustration for all concerned. And my personal feeling was that if council were present after 2 or 3 meetings, they might determine that there was not needed anymore. But
That's a great vote of confidence.
Yeah, I was going to say,
you just ran Jeff, but it is, I sat through a couple of those meetings, and it's very hard. They have a, well, I don't know, it's just no other way to say it except that it's hard.
Right.
And they're committed to completing it, but they would like council present to do that, and if he can't be present, to wait till he can be present to complete it. If it's a question of 2 years versus 2.5 years, for something we've been working with for I don't know how many years, I'm not sure that it makes a big difference. But
So I certainly think that, they are volunteers and they are spending a lot of time on this, of their own time, and I think we need to support them as much as they can, and if they need legal counsel to get this done, I think that's important, but I am concerned about putting just unlimited amount of time on legal counsel with the committee. I mean, there has to be some sort of a budget, some sort of oversight with the budget. We can't just say this can go on for...
So if you're doing the next fiscal,
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So I feel like we're maybe putting the cart before the horse. Maybe I'm missing something. Have they met since June 2nd?
Not on Chapter 16.
Right.
They have met.
So they haven't seen
The deletions report,
deletions report, so...
500-page. I have a feeling I know what that would do.
I can comment on the deletions report. The problem is that this is an entire revision. So if you take, a 200-page document, you move chapter 1 to chapter 6, everything gets, you can't just do a track changes. I started out doing a track changes so we could keep track of things. But there have been kind of some global changes, just not necessarily even substantive, just moving things to make more sense that the deletions report just can't track. So I don't know if Mr. Mangley thinks differently, but that's the problem with just going through it and saying, oh, here's the deletions report. It's just really, personally, I think it's useless.
Right. So I keep on getting worried that they say they got to have legal counsel, and we're not really talking about the core of the issue, which is, is there any good way to manage these edits so that we can review them, or is it just so much that we've got to do it differently? To me, it has less to do with legal counsel being at every meeting and more about what's the right way to revise Chapter 16. And I feel like people are getting wrapped around the axle on whether Jeff is there or not, and that's not the issue. And I think it kind of does a disservice to everybody who's watching this because they feel there's some scandal, like someone's trying to hide something, or some information, there were changes being proposed, for nefarious reasons, and that's not the case. So
I agree with you.
let's talk about the process and less about whether or not we're going to order Jeff to show up for every meeting. I mean, this keeps on getting brought up, yet the Planning Commission hasn't even looked at the changes report. This is just kind of frustrating to me because this is about the third time we've talked about it, and we haven't even gone back to the Planning Commission with, here's what you guys asked for. What do you think?
Well, yes,
So
we have.
I'm really trying to figure this one out.
We went back with a report prepared by staff highlighting the changes. The problem with the changes...
I understand that.
Okay, and...
Since the last time we talked about it, we said, okay, go do the complete red line. And they haven't seen
We
that.
can't do a complete red line.
It's 500 pages. We have
No,
it.
that's a deletions report. There is no complete red line.
Well,
There is no red line. That was another thing that was asked for. There is no red line.
I understand that. What exactly did you guys prepare? Did you do the diff between the two documents?
Yes. And in
So
fact,
everything that was changed, right? It's the diff, but it's not an obvious diff because you're moving stuff, and so one place is deleted, one place it's added, right?
No.
Is that what I'm saying? Is that what I'm hearing?
there was a summary report of the last chapter, I believe it was Chapter 6 of Article 16, that said, here are the significant changes that have been incorporated in this draft in front of you. And it did get bogged down on, well, hold it, this word is different than what it was in the old draft, and you didn't highlight this, why? So again, it got bogged down by,
Yeah.
there are changes here, they haven't been highlighted or brought to our attention, and that has confounded the situation.
It has,
even
and
worse.
then is this a change that was legally required, or is this a change that somebody felt like changing, or, it is a problem.
So here's the deal. If we're going to answer every one of those questions, this is going to take a long time, right, with Jeff.
No,
our
I
legal
don't think
counsel.
it will. That's their belief, that it won't take a long time with Jeff. That's exactly what their belief is, that they could say, well, why'd this happen? And he would say, because there's a case, or because somebody, it's not a legal requirement, it's somebody else, he would know the difference. And that's their feeling. I tend to support it.
But what we've heard is he was just a note taker, not necessarily just, sorry.
Is it all right if I just finish the line of questioning?
Yeah.
Or, not line of questioning, sorry. Well, this legal talk now. One of the things that I was going to suggest is that maybe we have, Planning Commission have one more meeting to discuss how they want to proceed. I think we have maybe enough in the budget for one more meeting. Would that be fair? And what they can get accomplished in that time, they can get accomplished. And then if not, we hold it over until we can let them maybe take some more time and discuss what would be the best process, and then but move it back into next year until we can come up with the more appropriate funding.
Are you done?
Now I'm done.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if we do that, whatever they do accomplish will, in preparation for the board, will require more legal time, right? So it's not a matter of just spending for that one meeting. It's, okay, whatever they accomplish then has to get pulled out, and sent to the board, as first reading, second reading, right, that kind of stuff. So I'm supportive of them meeting again, looking at where they are, and having Jeff there, and saying, is there something we can do this year, knowing that we don't have the budget for Jeff attending every meeting? And letting the planning commission kind of work it out before we revisit the issue. And I kind of wonder, why can't, it's amazing to me that, I understand this is a tricky issue, but it seems like we should be able to work this out, and instead it just keeps on coming back to us, as opposed to planning commission saying, here's how we need to do this, and not just by saying, we've got to have Jeff, because I think we're saying, listen, we just don't have the budget for it, so what can you do? And I'd like to give them the material that's been generated and let them work it out before we have to revisit this issue, because they haven't seen the material that they asked for. So, and maybe I'm just getting a little too frustrated with this, keep continually coming up.
Well, I think
Apologize for expressing it, but...
you may be frustrated, but the
And they are
frustration
too,
isn't
and I contacted-
appropriate
and I-
because we haven't resolved anything.
No, and I contacted the chair, and we traded some emails, and I haven't heard back from him. He said, wait till we meet again. So, something changed, and they haven't even met. What changed?
So they can't meet on it till it's prepared for them to come to a meeting.
Right, and now it's ready, so if he doesn't know what's going on, that's another issue. If he hasn't been apprised of the time frame around when this material will be brought back for discussion, that's another issue.
But
But-
if you, in their meeting on June 2nd, their motion specifically was what they're asking for of us. They've spent nothing, if nothing else they've discussed process this spring unsuccessfully. And they've gotten through parts, but not very much of Chapter 16. So if you're frustrated, you have no idea of their level of frustration. And I just don't think it's being done right. And for a rewrite of Chapter 16, for the first time in 8 years, there have been many times when probably legal counsel was not required, but probably the most important time for them to have it, except for public hearings maybe, and they don't. And so I would recommend that they not do this until they can have them. That's my recommendation. I wouldn't want to be, if we get it as a board, we're not going to be happy.
I recommend we let them decide at their next meeting.
Well, I think
And
they
whatever-
had.
if well, no, they haven't, because they haven't seen the latest material.
Okay.
And they can do whatever they want, right? They can say, we're not going to proceed, and then it's up to the board to say whether we want to proceed or not. I'm not supportive of us doing anything until they've reviewed it. And so, for me, the ball's in their court, and they decide. So,
Trustee D'Souza?
So is it required, legally required, that the planning commission review it or do the changes? Or is that something, if they don't do it, who does that? Is that the board then?
The board, yeah.
But is it required that they,
I think the code requires that they have a chance to review it, but doesn't require that they complete a review.
okay.
So, to give them the opportunity, because the planning commission can't just stall out something, for good reason or for not. The board has the ultimate authority. on
Right.
ordinances.
Well, I certainly would like their input on this. I think it's important enough that, and this is something that they look at. I would really like to have their input on it. However, if it's just becomes something that it's going to become stalemate and nobody's going to do anything on, then the other option is, how does the board feel about doing it? Because that's what's going to happen if they don't.
I've seen the document.
Well, and I don't, personally, I'd be more than happy to have the planning commission. That's why I'd rather, whatever we need to help them along look at this, is going to make it easier on us, but.
Actually, I've also seen what staff prepared, and, I think that's pretty good. But I haven't seen the deletions report, and I'm not anxious to look at 500 pages of deletions either.
So, Trustee Sorelli, do you feel like they have a process in place that,
They have,
back to
yes, they had a
Bill's
process
question.
in place to go through chapter by chapter, using the report prepared by staff, explaining the changes and the highlights, highlighting the changes. I attended, I'm not sure if it was the June meeting or a meeting in May. I think it was probably the June meeting where it just got totally bogged down because they were going through the changes, and the highlighted changes, among the highlighted changes was not something that somebody thought was significant, that they caught. And so why are we looking at this? And why aren't we talking about this? And, you know...
And did you have a feeling that that was a legal question, or was it a...
No, that particularly was not a legal question. That was had to do with setbacks and so forth. It was not a legal question. So, you know, when you get into Chapter 16, you talk about the charts
Yeah.
and the numbers, and...
That's the zoning district material, which we really didn't do any legal work on at all, that section.
Yeah, it's not, yeah, right, it wouldn't have been, I can't imagine what would have been a legal requirement in there. And so there were some changes in there, and it was like, well, why are we doing this? You know, and
But that, having our attorney present wouldn't have helped
Charlie
with that
only
one.
could have said, that's not a legal requirement. That's about the extent of what he would have said then.
You know, it was an involved process. The staff was involved at the beginning, and then, you know, our office took a crack at it, went through the whole document, and then staff got involved again at the end, and we did a lot of policy planning issues, you know, along with the legal changes. So there's aspects that are that everybody sort of had a say in, and I, you know, I can't comment on why they need me. I think that I help, you know, but there's also the need for staff as well.
Yeah, oh, definitely, most definitely. Staff has to be there, kind of during the presentation side.
Do you have a, I mean, I don't want to be putting you on the spot, but did they have a feeling about how they could use, how could they be efficient? How could they do the process and use the attorney's time wisely? Is there a...
Well, this is
discussion
where I
about that?
thought, in my sense, just from what I could pick up, is if they got going one or two meetings, that they would sort of get a feel, and it eventually would be that the attorney isn't necessary. However, I think our budget issues are still such that they probably couldn't even do that much right now.
My only concern about delaying this is that, you know, if I was sitting in the room trying to think about this, I try to have sort of a concept of how the things are moving, and if I have to wait for several months to come back and look at something, I'm going to be like, no, how did we get, you know,
Oh, yeah.
how did we get here?
I agree with that, too. So if, you know, way of trying to go is to fund a couple of meetings and then transition out again to a point where written questions could be sent if they actually came up after it got started again with the attorney present for a couple of meetings, maybe wean themselves of some feeling of need for the attorney to be there so that they got some momentum.
Somehow I'd like to be able to provide the attorney to be present at a couple of meetings and then move forward, because I don't want this to be bogged down and actually have to come back all the way around again and start at the beginning to talk about this because we've lost traction.
Right, it's a fair comment. The significance of their motion at that last meeting was that they would complete the task regardless of, you know, even if they had a couple of members that didn't like proceeding without a red line or something like that. Because there are a couple of members that really were insistent upon a red line that doesn't exist. So, but I think if I could, at risk, speak for the chairperson, I would imagine he'd be willing to at least try a couple of meetings if we could fund that, to see if they could get something going, or a meeting, get a process going where they could then have a method of identifying if they had legal questions that could be captured and presented to council after the meeting with a report back. But a meeting with the attorney first to sort of get this thing going, I don't know, I'm guessing. I mean, there are a couple of members that will not be happy with any process other than, but there's, I'd say, a majority that are willing to try to do this reasonably.
And so the first meeting that you postulate would require additional meeting time is, that's nothing, right? Couple hours, right?
Right.
So that's not really the bulk of the time being spent. The first meeting, do you think, just without preparation and background, just having somebody there would help them move forward with the process, or?
Well, I don't know whether it'd be worthwhile to give them a deletions report or not. They did ask for that. It would be something they asked for, maybe something they, we don't always ask for. Careful what you ask for. Careful what you ask for, because you might get it.
Well, I guess what I'd recommend is have, one more meeting of the Planning Commission to talk about this, to see who wants the deletions report in paper and who else would like to have it. I assume it's on, you could burn that to a disk somehow.
Yeah, I didn't actually do it. I'm sure we have a copy.
So I assume everybody would want it on a disk. Have that meeting, talk about the process, and hopefully they could feel comfortable about moving forward and then get a report back from the chairman of the Planning Commission. Does that sound
Were
reasonable?
you suggesting with council there at that meeting?
Yes.
That sounds reasonable to me. I would ask town staff that's involved in this if they had any thoughts on this too, in fairness to them.
Mr. Magley?
Mr. Magley, because he's been...
He was hoping he wouldn't have to.
He's been most beaten about the head and shoulders in these meetings. I'd say it's only fair he has a chance to...
Thanks. Matt Magley, town staff. I think for the majority of the planning commission, they all agree that they want the legal attorney there at each meeting. Now, they haven't seen the deletions report. My guess is if we have another meeting with them and show them the report, it's not going to be enough. But just based on the conversations we've had with them on the issue. So we can definitely meet again and go over the deletions report, but I get the feeling that they'll come back and say, this is not enough for us. We'd like to have either legal counsel there or delay this to the future 2010 when we can budget appropriately for it.
This is killing me here.
You.
Yeah, well, I guess I'd have the initial meeting and see if that's where they're at, and just understand that, we have to somehow be prudent with the money that we're spending, and see if that moves the ball forward, and if not, then I guess we'll have to just stop the process and put it in for the budget for 2010 and come back around at that, but that would be really unfortunate.
Next meeting is August 2nd?
It's August 4th.
Okay.
However, I am out of
You're out.
town, and John Craycraft's out of town on the 4th, so I would suggest,
The 18th.
yes.
Yeah, I would recommend that too.
Okay.
So that would be without me there, just to figure out what's going on, or that would be there.
I think with you there,
Yeah, with you
we'll figure
there.
out the process. So, thank you. Justice Ray, anything else that you'd like to add? That was so good.
I could have left a note on June 30th for you to, or June 8th, or whatever, to discuss this in my absence.
There you go.
No, I have nothing else.
Hardin, anything from you?
I don't have.
Mr. Randall?
Very briefly, we talked earlier about 2 upcoming meetings. There's a meeting tomorrow night with the Boulder County Climate Smart Program, a mandatory meeting for anybody within the community that is interested in participating in the low-interest loan program for energy conservation improvements to their homes. It's in this room from 6 to 8 tomorrow. A reminder that next Tuesday, a week from tomorrow, the town and the Boulder County Sheriff's Department will be conducting the inaugural, what we hope will become an annual event, National Night Out. It's a large-scale event across the country, but this will be Superior's first foray into the event. It's a crime prevention, public safety, get-to-know-your-neighbor kind of event. The activities will be held at Community Park again from 6 to 8:30 on the 4th. The last item I had is, as the board knows, and as I mentioned at the last meeting 2 weeks ago, John Hawkes' last day is going to be on Friday. and I thought it would be remiss to at least not extend our appreciation and recognition for all that he's accomplished in his 2+ years with the town. From my perspective, he's brought a degree of competence and professionalism to the department and the town that we had not previously seen within that operation. He's improved the efficiency and effectiveness of each of our public utilities, and the list would include things that don't always get recognized or seen a lot. But the maintenance of our street lighting system, the improvement in our street striping, with all the controversy that has had over the years. But I would hope that you'd look at the streets over the course of the last 2 years and say we're not having the problems that we inherited a few years back. Improving operations at our water and wastewater facilities, and improving various services that have traditionally been provided through third-party vendors, and seeing that those contracts are being performed properly. A number of projects that had lied dormant, list is too long to mention, but seeing them through to conclusion, and most significantly, and something that we're seeing accomplished to date, is developing the town's first long-term, multi-year comprehensive street maintenance program and financing plan. I know it's something that the board had asked for on my first day. And it's something that not only have we spent a lot of time putting the plan together, but you're seeing the fruits by the many, many miles of streets that are being resurfaced right now. John, I want to thank you for all your contributions to the town. Wish you well in your move to Fort Collins. Their gain is our loss, but you've done a great job for us, and I appreciate your efforts on our behalf. The last one that I had was just to advise the board that you will be getting your preliminary or your proposed budget for FY 2010 on Monday. We're working on the final reports right now. It's in production, and then we'll be scheduling probably very late August or early September Committee of the Whole, Finance Committee meetings in order to start the board's review of the 5-year financial plan.
Great.
That's all I have.
Mr. Parker?
I don't have anything for you.
So I guess I'd just like to make a comment about Mr. Hawkes as well. I think that we frequently, the unsung heroes of the town of Superior, really the people that are working at the staff level. Department of Public Works is high priority, high visibility, but the person running that and managing that is sometimes not seen, and we just owe an immense amount of gratitude to Mr. Hawkes for doing all the hard work. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, John.
Thank you.
Good luck.
All right. With that, let's move to item number 8.
I asked one quick comment. I just, it might be of interest to ProStack. I met with several new residents of Superior last night that actually live in Saddlebrook and the Horizons, and we got around the discussion about the Community Park East, and I shared with them our thoughts about a BMX park and a disc golf and a dog park, and there was overwhelming approval. These are younger residents in their 20s, very active. So I just I hope that we make that happen. It'll be a great addition to this town. I mean, they moved in here because of a lot of the amenities, but so this was a surprise to them that we're thinking ahead, that we're planning on doing some more stuff, especially in their neighborhood. So just want to pass that along to you.
Thank you, Trustee Gregorius. And actually, I should say that I have, of any project that we've done in town, I mean, I think the streets are really cool personally, but the projects that have been in town that have generated the most positive comment is the Community Park East. People come up and talk to me and say, hey, that's a great idea. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited about it. So, all right. With that, move to item number 8, which is an executive session to consider the purchase, acquisition, lease, transfer, or sale of real, personal, or other property pursuant to CRS 24-6-402, (4), A, on various real estate transactions, and to consider personnel matters pursuant to CRS 24-6-402, (4), F, on the topic of the town manager's agreement. With that, I'd entertain a motion to go into an executive session by Trustee D'Souza, second by Trustee Gregorius. Further discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. We're in executive session. Thank you.